so wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues from not just around the city but across India gathered here for the closing program of K G Subramanyan Centenary celebrations. Today, of course, we have a wonderful panel which will be followed by a musical performance as a tribute to 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓. However, I would like to say a few things about the exhibition which has been received so beautifully and in such a heartfelt manner by people who have visited us over the last 3 months. According to our footfalls, we've had more than 3,500 people visit the exhibition, attend the talks, panel discussions, as well as the workshops. But as a friend pointed out when I said this, that the exhibition had a life beyond the physical. It was also there on the social media, on YouTube, and these were also attended in a way by people across India and I'm sure across the world. I would love to extend my thanks to Seagull and to 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝑘𝘓𝑚, who is our friend, and we had these conversations I think last year, and then this exhibition happened. Of course, Nancy, when we invited her to curate, came aboard without a thought that yes, she wanted to do something, and our conversation was how can we make this exhibition relevant to as much today as it was in the past, and how could she add different, as she calls beautifully, adjacencies and readings and nuances to material that we may all have been quite familiar with. So as you are looking at the images on the background, these are the many collateral programs. We've had 2 film screenings, which had a voyage with K G Subramanyan by Shaji and Karun, and Magic of Making K G Subramanyan by Gautam Ghosh. We had 3 workshops, including Shora painting workshop guided by Shomik Nondi Mojumdar, followed by a display and 45 participants. It became a gala event, and it was such a wonderful thing to see. There was a shadow puppetry workshop guided by Shantunil Ganguly and Jhalapala team, a 2-day workshop followed by performances, attended by more than 150 people. There was a sign making workshop curated by artist 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Sen with participants and some very amazing signs that came out of it. We had a summer artsy camp with disappearing dialogues collectives. Around 40 students from compromised backgrounds worked on K G Subramanyan's inspired art and created a playful mural. We had special needs and differently abled children workshops. There were also panel discussions and talk on Shora painting and something called Badami Holud, which was a presentation by the students of Patho Bhavan of Kolkata on the adaptation of the K G Subramanyan mural in Kala Bhavan. And then there was a panel discussion on murals of 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 and preservation challenges ahead which was conducted by Professor R. Shivakumar, Professor Dilip Mitra, and Amit Donda in collaboration with the KCC Conservation Lab. And more than 500 archival images of the process of documentation were presented. So as you can see, this exhibition would not have been possible without our collaborators, well-wishers, and friends. And there's a long list which 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 will read out later to offer our thanks. Right now, I will ask 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 to introduce today's panelists, and it will be followed by a musical program, which is also a tribute to 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ushmita Di. So again, welcome to all of you. And so tonight's panel discussion will explore the key themes methods and contexts of our centenary exhibition, rereading K G Subramanyan's practice. We are honored to have an esteemed panel featuring N. Pushpamala, Paula Sengupta, Sanchayan Ghosh, and our exhibition curator, Nancy Adajania. So the panel needs no introduction, but I'll introduce them very briefly. So our first panelist is Pushpamala N. She's renowned for her strongly feminist and subversive work as a photo and a video artist, sculptor, performer, writer, and curator. Through her collaborations with photographers, writers, theatre directors, and filmmakers, Pushpamala N actively challenges dominant cultural and intellectual narratives. Her polemical work critically examines the nation-state in an age-old globalized neoliberalism, using cultural memory to explore history and contemporary society with irony and wit. She refers to various genres of image making, resulting in richly layered works with multiple references. The artist casts herself in the main role in each of her performative works. The reclamation of the source material becomes an act of self-possession over her image and body. So thank you, Pushpamala ma'am, for being here and accepting to be a part of the panel. Our second panelist is Dr. Paula Sengupta. Paula is an artist, academic, and curator, and art writer. She is the professor and head of the Department of Graphics, Printmaking, and the Dean of Faculty of Visual Arts in 𝗏𝗏 Bharati University, Kolkata. She is the author of The Printed Culture, 4 Centuries of Indian Printmaking, published by the Delhi Art Gallery in New Delhi in 2012, The Foreign and Indigenous Influences in Indian Printmaking, published by Lambert Academic Publishing in Saarbrücken, Germany in 2013, amongst other publications. She works across mediums which include printmaking, textile arts, papermaking, moving image, etc. Her curatorial projects include Living a Dark Night for the 𝘊𝘅𝘅𝘍𝘓 Trust in Gurgaon, A Soul Ungendered, Anupam Sud, a retrospective of DAG Modern in 2019-2020, 𝗊𝘅𝗷𝘊𝘕𝘈, the old currency building in Kolkata for DAG Modern, and the ASI in 2019, Popular Prints and the Freedom Struggle at the 𝗖𝘂𝘍𝑚 Museum, Red Fort in Delhi, Trajectories 19th to 21st Century Printmaking from India and Pakistan from the Sharjah Art Museum in Sharjah in UAE in 2014, and the 6 editions of the printed picture, 4 Centuries of Indian Printmaking for DAG Modern in India from 2012 to 2018. Paula ma'am, thank you for being here. And our third panelist is Mr. Sanchayan Ghosh. He was born in Kolkata. He's an artist and pedagogue. He has received his MFA in 1997 and BFA in 1995 from 𝘊𝘌𝘕𝘆𝘎 University in Shantiniketan, where currently he is working as a professor, associate professor in the Department of Painting. He lives and works in Shantiniketan. Through his continuous exploration of site-specific interactive art practice, he has explored workshop-based collective community dialogues over the years and worked closely with different theatre forms from all over India. He was awarded the Charles Wallace Fellowship in UK in 2024 and worked on Merge Down and Resist with 3 generations of Asian migrants in Bristol. He has also participated in the 𝗊𝘅𝗍𝘕𝘎 and explored the community sound project in Complete Circles and Invisible Voices in 2012. In 2017, he participated in an education project which is called Under the Mango Tree in Documenta 14 and conducted a circle walk. He has been associated with different pedagogy projects with NSD, FICA, and 5 million incidents of Max Miller Bhavan in Kolkata. Further, he co-curated second session of Under the Mango Tree in Shantiniketan in 2020 and is one of the curators of 2018 Kochi Museums Biennale. So his collaborative sound project, Shortwave Transit Tales, commissioned by Documenta under his radio project, was transmitted in 8 countries of 4 continents. This piece has been recently selected as one of the 80 works from the world to be shown in 3 exhibitions in Basel, Switzerland, Berlin, Weimar, and Germany. So his selected solo exhibitions include Reversed Perspective, 3 Conjunctures in 2014, and Sisyphus Effect in Experiment in 2010. Sanchanda, thank you for being with us in this panel. And next, in discussion with the esteemed panel, we have Nancy Adajania, who is of course the curator of 100 Years in Counting Rescripting K G Subramanyan. Adajania will be moderating the session and as well as present a document to extend her curatorial vision. She's a cultural theorist and curator based in Bombay. She was the joint artistic director of the 9th Gwangu Biennale in South Korea in 2012. She has curated several path-breaking exhibitions, including most recently, Woman is as Woman Does for CSMVS Museum with JNAF in 2012, 2022, I'm sorry, a first ever intergenerational mapping of the works of Indian women artists, filmmakers, and activists against the backdrop of women's movement in India. Adajania's other major research-based exhibitions include the retrospectives of artists Navjot Altaf, Sudhir Padwardhan, 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗍𝗓, and Nelly Setna. She has proposed several neo-theoretical models through her extensive writings on subaltern art, media art, public art, collaborative art, transcultural art, and the biennal culture in the global south. For more than 2 decades, she has written on the practices of women artists of several generations by deploying a transdisciplinary approach that melds art history, feminist theory, anthropology, activism, and philosophy. Thank you, Nancy, for curating the show. And I would like to begin this with a huge round of applause for Nancy and for her being so good with the entire thing. So, Nancy, please, the stage is on to you. You can begin your conversations. Shall I put your presentation on for this? Yes. So.
Thank you so much, Ushmita, as well as 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗍𝗓. It's really wonderful to be back in Calcutta. I came here 2 months ago to install the show, and I was here for almost 7 to 8 days. And now I'm back here to wrap up the show. But Emami Art, the Emami Art team, exhibition team, has done an excellent job of keeping the exhibition alive by generating a whole roster of events which are intense and extremely engaging as well as immersive. And we've already seen some images of the workshops and seminars that they have conducted. So a warm welcome to all those who have assembled here today for the closing program of the KGS Centenary Show. To provide a roadmap for today's discussion, each of us will make a presentation followed by a brief conversation and a Q&A with the audience. Thank you so much, Pushpa, Sanchayan, and Paula, for agreeing to be my co-conspirators for this evening. I will be discussing the significance of a research-based exhibition which critically annotates its materials to speak to the political and cultural agencies of the present. Artists Pushpamala and Sanchayan will explore the influence of KGS on their practice and how they have respectively expanded his legacy to address questions related to performance, pedagogy, collaborative and community art practices, gender politics, ecology, and Adivasi art. Paula will speak about the research-based exhibition from her own specific experience of crafting curatorial methods to transmit her extensive research on the history of printmaking, a medium which has only recently received its due. It is an honor and a privilege to curate the centenary show of the artist K G Subramanyan. Most people would consider themselves fortunate if they could set off a single revolution in their lifetime. KGS radicalized each of the 4 major areas of activity he had been involved with from the mid-40s onwards, whether it was painting, teaching, cultural criticism, and policy making. First and foremost, I'd like to thank 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝘍𝗓, who invited me to curate the KGS Centenary Show. He has worked tirelessly over the decades, organizing traveling exhibitions of the maestro. Naveen has also published KGS's cultural criticism and his children's books, thereby creating a climate for the reception of an artist whose practice was not just confined to the studio, but expanded into the larger cultural domain. My thanks are also due to 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝘍𝗓 Agarwal and Ushmita Sahu for supporting this show so generously and for believing in my curatorial vision. This exhibition could not have found a better home. Thank you. Where's Ushmita? Thank you. KGS has been a part of my consciousness since my college years. In my 20s, I conceived the national symposium called 𝘊𝘂𝗀 Crafts Survive at the National Center for the Performing Arts in Bombay in 1995. I wrote a position paper then titled Mother Goddess on a Bicycle and Such Are the Themes to set the conceptual framework for that gathering. Since my background was in the humanities, I was more inclined to approach the crafts from a social justice and an equity perspective, rather than only from an art historical one. To this effect, I cited KGS's writings as a major contribution to the question of the state's responsibility towards the livelihood, skills, and the future of the crafts people. As the editor of Art India magazine in the early 2000s, I conceived an issue which I call the art of writing on art, because I felt that it was important to provide a genealogy of Indian art criticism, especially for a new generation of readers for whom these ideas and the world that they came from were fast receding into the past. Beginning with Havel and Kumaraswamy, this anthology of essays included Abanindranath Tagore, O.C. Ganguly, Binoy Sarkar, Niharanjan Rai, Mulk Raj Anand, and K G Subramanyan, among others. I wrote the essay on KGS, on his cultural criticism, imparted through his seminal books, The Moving Focus, The Living Tradition, and The Creative Circuit, but also his very thoughtful criticism for journals like Vrishchik, edited by 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘕𝘎 and 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓, and the art heritage catalogs published by the Al-Qazis. Which brings me to the present exhibition, 100 Years and Counting, Rescripting K G Subramanyan, which includes more than 200 works, from postcard-sized drawings to gorgeous reverse paintings on acrylic sheets, to mock-ups from children's books, maquettes from the powerful mural War of the Relics from 2013, to preparatory drawings of the murals, as well as KG's fabulous toys. Oh, sorry. Even as I was invited to curate the Centenary show from the collections of Siegel and Emami art, I extended my curatorial brief by introducing a considerable amount of research material and contextual ephemera from diverse sources. Rather than make a chronological show representing every single phase and genre constituting the artist's practice, and this has been done before while the artist was alive, I chose to design what I would call a theater of provocations, critically annotating certain political and aesthetic aspects of his practice through arguments, debates, and stories. A 𝗊𝘂𝗀𝘓𝘓𝘕𝘎 kind of bewitchment. If we want to keep an artist's legacy alive for the next 100 years, we need to communicate its continuing relevance to the urgencies of our time. With this thought in mind, I invited the viewer into an immersive space covered with silhouettes based on KGS's illustrations for his children's books. These stunningly powerful drawings from his children's book, 𝘊𝘌𝘕𝘐, which was published in 1972 by Siegel, gesture towards the need for an inclusive, pluralistic way of living, an ethic that is even more relevant for our bigotry-ridden times today. 𝘊𝘌𝘕𝘐 straddled the bird, animal, and human kingdoms. He is both one and many. He is a comforting presence at a time when being multiple invites punitive action. One of the leitmotifs of the show is KGS's political philosophizing, whether it is through a supposedly minor genre like children's books or his large-scale murals in public spaces. I also trace in his work a constant current of dialogue with the Gandhian notion of the idealized village, as well as Rabindranath Tagore's belief in aesthetics as a path to a more just and imaginatively expansive society. This show avoids the pitfalls of hagiography by reassessing KGS's practice from a feminist perspective, as well as critically contextualizing the implications of a hyphenated arts-crafts relationship. The point is to rededicate ourselves to the fullness of an artist's legacy with all its contradictions and ambivalences. A research-based exhibition helps us to dramatize the underregarded aspects of an artist's practice. My curatorial methodology draws on my insights gained from reading art history, as well as the entangled histories of art, craft, and design against the grain, but it equally draws on what the anthropologist Margaret Mead calls the divinatory method, by which she means it's a form of intuitive gleaning of clues, traces, gestures, and scraps of sense before meaning stabilizes into a recognizable form. It began with a deceptively simple watercolor by KGS of a woman doling out masks. You can see that right there at the left-hand side of the screen. I was looking at this work in the Siegel collection, and as I allowed myself to free associate, a series of images appeared on my mind screen. The powerful bahurupis, or polymorphs, in KGS's paintings began to walk in a stately procession on my mind screen. One of the prompts for the masquerading protagonists of KGS's paintings is a pair of village boys, or bahurupis, who would appear on the Kala Bhavan campus as either Ram or Ravan or Kali or Shiva. And the artist remembers them, and I quote him, striking heroic poses and breaking into loud dialogue and action. Between these village boys and the mythical stereotypes, a new reality was born, mixing the worldly with the unworldly, or fact with fantasy, close quote. So what we have on the screen, on the left-hand side, are these brilliant polychrome reverse paintings on acrylic sheets from the Siegel collection. And they glow like stained glass, pulling us into a carnival of the many-armed and many-limbed goddesses, rattling skulls and provoking priapic beasts. Libidinal energy spreads through the works, manifesting as conspicuous vaginas, exorcised by tantric spells, and bouquets of flowers eerily turning into phalluses. In the midst of this high-spirited universe, by turns allegorical and caricatural, we take a pause to understand what attracts us and repels us about KGS's art. While some of us might be overwhelmed by the overtly sexual nature of his work, primarily framed from a male point of view, we still feel the need to return to his abundant, excessive vision. So what is it that it is in excess of? Could it be that intermediate space, the space of in-betweenness that is neither fully goddess nor fully mortal? If we look at the advent of the icon, for instance, we can see how sensuous flesh is straining to make its presence felt in this icon of the goddess. What we actually find in these works is this hovering liminal threshold between the sacred and the voluptuous that only a Bahurupi persona can offer us. The freedom not only to be many, but also never to become fully any one thing. Masquerading Bahurupis in KGS's paintings reminded me of two Baroda Art School students, Mrinalini Mukherjee and Pushpamala, who were inspired by KGS's ironic, witty, and humorous approach to art. I don't know why the images have been jumping, and I introduce these women artists at the beginning of the show in their performative avatars and end the show with questions related to how the KGS legacy may be expanded from a gendered perspective. On the left, we have Pushpa performing from a walk in the park on the library terrace at MSU in 1980. She will talk more about this during her presentation. And on the right, we have Mrinalini Mukherjee transforming herself into a horse, the hooves peeping out of a sari, and this was at the Kasoli Art Workshop in the late 70s. Speaking of masquerade, KGS's volatile polymorphs triggered another memory. I've always been fascinated and also haunted by the Bahurupi scene in 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏's film 𝘊𝘌𝗓𝗷𝗊𝘕𝘓𝗓. This show unfolds like a series of associative montages. The mise-en-scène of this exhibition is neither incidental nor illustrative. I have designed it such that unpredictable adjacencies can be staged between different works, worldviews, and artistic disciplines. 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 cinema was very important for me because I studied at the FTII, where the school was, of course, divided between those who loved 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and those who worshipped at the altar of Satyajit Ray. I, of course, admired both these great masters. We have Sita from 𝘊𝘓𝗔𝗓𝗪 here on the left-hand side of the screen. And born from a fault line in the earth, she's seen walking on a scalding, hot, abandoned airstrip in that particular sequence in the film. And while she's walking, she's suddenly startled by a Bahurupi dressed as a bloodthirsty Kali, shivering like an apparition in the sun. But when the Bahurupi is ordered to remove his devouring tongue by a passing elder, he returns to being an ordinary human being, a mere bag of bones deprived of magic and dignity. And that sequence always brings tears to my eyes. What does it mean to be able to participate in that moment of liminality, however brief and constricted it may be, and what does it mean to then return back to this wretched reality where you don't even have two meals a day? And here, for instance, you have the shot of the Bahurupi on the screen. As I imagine the theater of silhouettes based on KGS's children's illustrations, in my mind, another clue surfaced. These silhouettes devouring light reminded me of the work of the shadowgrapher Prasanna Raghava Rao. Long ago, I had read about Prasanna in KGS's memoir, Shruti Smriti. The shadowgrapher and puppeteer Prasanna Raghava Rao was the first student KGS met at Kala Bhavan when he arrived there in 1944. He was famous for creating incredible silhouettes of political leaders and beasts with his hands, just choreographing these figures with his fingers. I would contend that this playful and earthy shadowgraphy must have lingered on in KGS's mind and influenced his graphic style, especially for his children's books. And I quote here from KGS's memoir, where he says, as it happened, Prasanna was in Belgrade when the first non-aligned summit met. And on one of the evenings, he regaled everyone, which happened to be Nehru, Tito, and Sukarno, with his shadow play caricatures of the participants, and the program became a great hit, close quote. Similarly, KGS's toys, which we have borrowed from the faculty of the Fine Arts Baroda, remind me of Abanindranath Tagore's miniature toy sculptures, Kutum Katum. Before I move on to Abanindranath Tagore, I would like to just immerse ourselves a little bit in the toys that KGS made. These plucky beasts made by joining together plain pieces of wood or shaped out of a piece of bamboo, adorned with bits of felt and leather and beads, transport us into a world of captivating folk tales, but also the world of Orwell's Animal Farm. Why is the bulldog, or is that a tiger, muzzled and belted? Who tamed the lion? These toys were made with the help of 𝘊𝘅𝑐𝑖 Lal Verma, KGS's craftsperson colleague from the MSU faculty. 𝘊𝘅𝑐𝑖 Lal Verma was also an expert in making murals as well as stone and ivory carving. These diminutive toys, when you look at them, for instance, and they were made for the fine arts fairs, they are neither cuddly nor are they toys that can actually be broken into. And that reminded me of this wonderful essay by Charles Baudelaire. And there's this really touching moment in the essay where he talks about how a child, was very curious to find out, what actually lies inside the belly of a toy. And, in its excitement, the child just breaks open the toy. And when it breaks open the toy, it's disappointed because there's nothing in there. It's empty. And Baudelaire, in a way, implies that this is like a life lesson. It's about adulting, if you like, the word that's trending today. It's that moment of deep sadness where, you expect magic, but all you have is emptiness. And when you look at KGS's toys, for instance, as I said, they're not cuddly, and they're actually modernist toy sculptures. But even though they cannot be broken into, they have this sense of an enduring sense of the adbhut, a sense of wonder, a sense of joy that you feel when you look at them. And I know that these toys have been a great hit, and people have come back to see these toys again and again. And that's the thing about KGS's practice, whether it's his Bahurupi figures in his paintings, or his toys, or the figures in his children's books. We want to return to them again and again because they have that X factor. They have that something which is inscrutable, inexplicable, and that is the reason why we return to his work. And these toys were made, as I said, for the Fine Arts Fair at the MS University, Baroda in the 60s and 70s by KG. And the fair was meant to be a space for experimentation, where the students could freely move between different mediums, scales, and formats. They could work in collaboration with each other, but also with craftspeople. And this is, something that I'd like to critically annotate here. It is another matter that the craftspersons did not always have the opportunities due to the lack of social and cultural capital to become artists in their own right. 𝘊𝘅𝑐𝑖 Lal Verma was given immense love and respect by K G Subramanyan, and yet he could only ever assist artists to make their dreams come true. So this is also debated within the show. The complicated hyphenated relationship between artist-craftsperson is further annotated in the show through relaying the dialogue between KGS and Gandhi. KGS valorized Gandhi's ideal of the self-sufficient village republic. On screen, we have one of the structures of the Gandhi Darshan mural made in 1969. I could just paraphrase a Devanagari inscription that you find on this concrete structure, and where he's saying, where he's quoting Gandhi, which is that Bharat mein gaavon ka nash hoga, to Bharat ka bhi nash hoga. However, and I'd like to interject here, as Ambedkar has shown us, the Indian village was far from being a romantic site of harmony. It was a site of structural violence. I would argue that in subscribing to Gandhi's romantic ideas of the village and his fiduciary notions that the so-called lower caste should be placed under the trusteeship of the upper caste, KGS fell short of forging a truly equitable collaboration with craftspersons. Long ago, while researching the lineage of expanded sculptural practices in India, I had come across a reference to a lesser-known aspect of the legendary artist Abanindranath Tagore. And I'm alluding here to his toys, which we see on the screen. In the 1962 issue of Marg magazine, Mulk Raj Anand began his survey of contemporary Indian sculpture with 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘕𝘕𝘓𝑚 𝘊𝘓𝑚, miniature sculptures or toys made out of discarded materials and found objects. And what others would have just seen as an artist musing in his old age, Mulk Raj Anand legitimized as experimental art. And this had caught my eye many years ago. So for the KGS Centenary show, I wanted to construct a new lineage for his toys. So we've, of course, been told about how KGS was very interested in the figures that he saw on the wall drawings. He was inspired by contemporary folk toys. He was, of course, to go back into history, he was inspired by Harappan earthen toys. He was, of course, also influenced by Cubist collage and Dadaist sculptures. But I think that there is also a more proximate connection which we can make to 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝑚 𝘊𝘓𝑚. And for example, you can see that, I mean, is this an elephant? Is this a bird? And, you know, he would just be picking up, bits and pieces of wood. But also, as the Mark magazine archival document shows, he was also, picking up the labels of jam jars or the golden foil in a cigarette case. 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓, again, just like I've also shown in the show, another lineage for KGS's children's illustrations. 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 or 𝗓𝗟𝗟𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, the works made by Nandlal Bose. 𝗓𝗟𝗟𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 and 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓, in a way, deals with found objects. It deals with scraps and fragments of wood or stone. And how these artists improvise with these objects and create compositions. In Nandlal Bose's case, it manifests as a collage. And in 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝑚 Tagore's case, it manifests as toy sculptures. And then when I was looking at this archival document, you can see a crocodile by 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore, and it's very rough, kind of rough and ready earthy kind of texture. And I would also say that 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore's aesthetic was very wabi-sabi. It's, privileging the impermanent. And I just put these two toys together, 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore's crocodile, and Professor 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Gupta, for instance, please forgive me, Professor 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Gupta, he told me, and he's done this fantastic work on the Khuddur Jatra of 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore, which is the Dadaist Ramayan. And he told me that 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore was working on both the toys and on Khuddur Jatra around the same time, from the 1930s onwards. And so here you have 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓, and you have a toy by K G Subramanyan. And I must also share a little story. I mean, of course, I don't want to take up too much time, but I was reading in Rani Chanda, who has actually written a little memoir, which basically is based on her dialogue with 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore on 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓. And she talks about how 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore, would sort of leave his toy sculptures in his tool shed, or in his balcony, and then the langurs would come, and then, they'd sort of in the night, and they'd pick up all these toy sculptures and then scatter them all around his bungalow, Some would be on the terrace, some would be found in the garden. And then one day, 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore, I think he had made a mouse, if I'm not mistaken, and he just felt that it was a dead, inert material. So he just took his cigarette, and he just, sort of burnt some parts of the mouse, and in a way created a tail. And suddenly, he says, the mouse jumped out of his hands. And I love that, because my own imagination is of this adbhut kind, and I mean, I have this, kind of childlike fascination for all things adbhut and magical and liminal. And then when I was looking at our KGS's toys, here also in his toys, you'll find these burnt marks. So, I mean, there are connections which can be made between the toys of 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓𝘓 Tagore and KGS. But of course, they're doing two very different things, and yet there is a certain proximity between them. And I'd now like to move to, earlier I spoke about Pushpamala and Mrinalini Mukherjee and the creative affinities that they shared with KGS. Pushpamala's early terracotta and plaster of Paris sculptures were influenced by KGS's terracotta reliefs, his glass paintings, which were all brimming with wit and irony and humor, and carried the impress of everyday life. And yet, when you look at Pushpamala's representation of adolescent girls and women, you know that her approach to the subject of female sexuality is radically different from that of KGS. KGS exhibits a love-hate relationship towards the female body, feeling passionately about it, but also being overwhelmed by its sexuality. It could be said that Mrinalini Mukherjee became a fiber artist because of KGS's timely advice. As a student of MSU Baroda, she was experimenting with weaving during the Fine Arts Fair. And you see her here in this photograph at the extreme right of the grid, where she's showing off her weave that she's actually worn on her body. And she's photographed by Jyoti Bhatt while doing this performance of wearing her own weave. And KGS actually advised her to make weaving her main subject rather than just dabbling in it occasionally during the fine arts fairs. And then again, you see Mrinalini Mukherjee's fiber sculpture Pushp, which is confidently knotting together the cosmic and the corporeal in a very sahaj manner. And I don't think any male artist, as it were, could have achieved the miracle of a vagina flower that you actually see in that photograph. KGS was both ahead of his times. He liberated generations of artists by privileging a non-hierarchical approach to art. But equally, he was a man of his times. As a human being and a pedagogue, he did not discriminate between male and female artists. But as an artist, he continued to carry forward some of the established gender reflexes of his age and generation. To remedy this, I felt it was important to inject a feminist perspective into the show through the works of these female artists, gesturing towards these piquant paradoxes in the life and art of KGS. Thank you very much for being so patient. And I think I should end here and not take any more of your time. And I'd now like to invite Pushpamala to make her presentation.
One sec. Yeah. Just can you open mine, please? And also, sir, just fix it to manual. Because otherwise it'll start sort of going back and forth. No, why enable editing? No, fix it to manual, display settings. Because otherwise, no, make it manual. Here, this one. Hi. Thank you, Nancy and Emami, for inviting me here. Actually, I wanted to see Bunny Sir's show. And it's like, in a way, we'd forgotten about him, you know. I mean, he was, of course, his iconic figure, but this has reminded us of his work again and how he inspired all of us, actually, whether as students or the art scene as such, a major kind of figure. So Nancy asked me to show some of my early works and just talk about how I encountered Mani Sir and how I was influenced by him and so on. And also I'm going to show you at the end of it, which are not very good images, but she told me after I came here, so I just downloaded it from the web, some of my performance work, which I was not earlier going to show. So everyone, we were all scholarship students from Karnataka, from the Lalit Kala Academy, and so when everyone was in Karnataka, there was a lot of politics, and they were against this scholarship being given at all, and all of us sent out. So they said, oh, they go to Baroda and they become influenced by Subramanyan, look at this Pushpamala N. So they thought I was directly his student, but actually I was never his student. In fact, when I first joined Baroda in 1977, Subramanyan was not there at all. He was in Shantiniketan. So I think he came back after a year, and he must have, I think he was there in 78, 79, after which he again left for good to Shantiniketan. He left Baroda for good. And then I was a young student there, and I joined the sculpture department, and he was in the painting department. So there was, I think I just met him once. I must have had one encounter with him. But of course, he was this kind of all sort of embracing iconic figure over there. And when he was there, he used to do these Saturday talks, where he used to talk rather satirically about modern art and so on. But I see, but he had a lot of influences from modern art movements, actually, which you can see very clearly in this show, because I was talking to Nancy and saying, he takes a lot from the folk. But then he, whether it's in his terracottas or his glass paintings, and you can see Kaligat, or you can see different kinds of practices there, but his work is very modern, because it's got that sharp wit and that kind of satire and comment, and of course, he takes a lot from expressionism. So his work is very expressionistic. So I'll just show you, I haven't seen these murals at all, actually. These are but I saw them in print when I was a student, and of course, I think I even tried to do some tablets like this, panels like this when I was a very young student. But when I went to Baroda, I was, I think I was interested in this idea of indigenism, which was also there because of Subramaniam and coming from Shantiniketan, and using poor materials. I was interested in using poor materials. So very early works had, I was already experimenting with the papier-mâché and terracotta. I'm not showing you those things now, very young works. So these are this famous series that he did, about the Bangladesh war. And you can see that he's obviously taken a folk sort of material, and this whole material of terracotta itself, it's not a final material. I mean, classically, it was, plaster of Paris and terracotta were used for maquettes, and never for a final work. And even these, terracotta temples and all that would be seen as folk. They're not classical, sort of. The classical would be stone and metal and so on. And you can see this extremely expressionist language, reminiscent of George Grosz, the German expressionist, that he's using over here. Very searing works, actually. And then these kind of works, which also continue into his glass paintings, very simple, everyday things. This is just a kind of, images of women crying. This is wonderful. One of my favorite works, actually, in the show is these women breastfeeding. That's, very interesting. These kind of, he always divided up the space into panels and sections, and he did different images over there. Not very great slides from the web. Yeah, this, I think when he was there, this Karan Grover, the architect, had a gallery in the planetarium in the Kamati Bagh in Baroda. So lots of artists he got down to have shows, and so we saw some of the senior artist shows. And Subramaniam at that time had this show of glass paintings, small glass paintings, and they influenced all of us. I think many artists, it's not only me who was influenced, obviously, like, a lot of artists were, students were influenced, but this particular show was somehow seminal, because I think for me, when I was an art student, I chose sculpture and I loved working with my hands, but, the sculpture as such, I think it's all over the world, is seen to be this very serious, somber affair, and I somehow didn't fit into that whole, I was just, I've sort of frozen, I couldn't work at all, I was very confused, I didn't know what to do. And I think this, seeing this particular show sort of opened up something, because, of course, it was not sculpture as such, but also like the memory of his terracottas, where sculpture could be, humorous, or it could be witty, and it could be light-hearted, playful, and about everyday things. This, I think this, even the titles, the woman chewing pan or something like that. It's very simple. Yeah, so finally, I think in the final year, as I said, I was frozen and I could barely work. And I used to do these little sketches, and I remember like my teacher at the time was Kaneria sir, and he said, I showed him my sketchbook and I said, I don't know what to do. He said, why don't you make them into sculptures? And there were these little cartoonish kind of sketches, and then I started doing the series of sculptures of these girls, actually, young women, and they were in painted plaster. And at that time, as I said, the sculpture scene in India was very conservative, but in Baroda what was happening was that several of the students of us there were actually experimenting in different materials. Like there was Dhruv Mistry and Ravinder Reddy and Ladi who were experimenting with the fiberglass. And 𝗏𝘓𝑖 and me were working with the terracotta and so on. That was a little later that I started seriously working with terracotta, but even something like painting a sculpture was supposed to be, bad. And so we were doing all these things. So they had titles like Girls Smiling and something like that. And so they were all small sculptures. So suddenly I was sort of coming into my own, and this liberation was definitely because I was very inspired by Subramanyan's work, Woman Adjusting Bra. So we were always doing these, sketches of, in the hostel. We were supposed to do sketches every day. And it was not anything based on life, but it was also something to do with all these ads that you saw and these kind of models in the shops, these bra shops and all that. So it was like very playful. I mean, there was a lot of interest in the popular as well, in Subramanyan's work and also generally in Baroda, particularly Bhupen Khakar. So these were sort of how I was building up the works, and suddenly I think Kaneria came there, and he was very interested in, he really sort of helped me with my work, and he said, stop here, leave it this way and let's see how it goes. Again, this very expressionistic kind of work. This was my exam work for BA, final year BA. It's called Angry Girl. So actually it was based on an old photograph of my mother. Of course, she was not wearing a frock, but she's got this horrendous expression because she's forced to sit in a kind of family photograph. So what happened was, so one of the things was I did my BA in Bangalore University before going to Baroda and joining BA again. And that was in the 70s, and it was a very vibrant period intellectually and culturally in Bangalore. And we were all sort of stout feminists. So when I came to Baroda, I was very sure that my work would be feminist. And by the time I came to MA, I was wondering what to do. I said, I will do a series of work of girl growing up to become a woman, and it will be in terracotta. I decided to restrict myself because I think the problem in the BA course was that every 15 days we were asked to work in a different material, and that completely confused me. So I said I will limit myself, I'll stick to one subject and one material. So this became a very popular work. Again, 𝘊𝘓𝘔𝘕𝘎, also strongly influenced by Subramaniam, I think. He got a grant and he had a series of craftspeople coming to Baroda and doing workshops. I think they would come from different parts of India and stay for a month, and the students would work with them. So these guys had come from Molela in Rajasthan. So this is actually very inspired, this form by Molela sculptures. They were like small sculptures. Then of course there's a lot of Subramaniam you can see, and the way the clay is handled. So I've worked out my own way of working with the clay three-dimensionally. So this work won the national award, so it became extremely popular, And there again, as I said, I was interested in creating some sort of indigenous language, using an indigenous material. Of course, terracotta is, universal. It's not really particularly Indian at all, but at that time I thought so. So they're all life-size, So this is a life-size sculpture of a young girl, adolescent girl, and she is holding a cowrie shell at the back. And so again, I started using all these references. The trefoil pattern on the blouse is from that famous, the Mohenjo-daro priest. So, yeah, this woman with purse. So I tried some kind of firing to make it black. This again is very inspired by the Roman wolf. But they were all like things that were around in the campus. So I saw this sort of dog, it's called bitch. And I saw this bitch actually in the campus, which had something like 10 puppies. So it's very kind of a monumental sort of looking, again, life size, very monumental looking figure with these puppies on either side, you know, feeding. And these are the pigs. There are 2 pigs. Again, there were a lot of pigs on the campus. So I made a lot of studies of them. And so I was just, actually it's interesting, you know, this, the kind of subjects I was choosing because, you know, sculpture again, like I was very interested in classical Indian sculpture as well. And it's about, you know, it's Varaha, not a pig. Or it's something like, you know, some kind of divine figure or mythological figure. But I was actually doing these different kinds of everyday things. So this was actually my last work. In fact, I started off as an examination work, very complicated sort of thing, again life size. Here she's growing up to be a woman, young woman, and she's holding a monkey mask. This again is some sort of, I think I had that mask, some kind of folk mask. And she's wearing a salwar kameez. And there again in sculpture, you know, how do you do modern costume in sculpture? So again, I think Reddy was also doing that. He was doing these kind of, these buxom girls like, you know, and wearing pants and salwar kameez and all that. So we were trying out, several of us, all these kinds of things where, okay. So so some years ago, I suddenly got a letter from Asia Art Archive. And they sent me this bunch of images and said, like, you know, we can recognize you, but who are the other people in these images? And these are Jyoti Bhatt's photographs, and he can't remember. So I did a kind of Rashomon, actually. You know, I sent it around to some friends, and I said, can you remember anything about this? Because my mind was blank. I didn't remember it at all. And so I sent it around to 5 or 6 friends, and they all sent me back that we had a long conversation, which I put it all together, and I gave it finally to Asia Art Archive. So the thing was, so this was called a walk in the park, apparently. And you know, when I was a student, I used to put up these skits. So a group of us would do these crazy mime skits, and that is me as a 40-kilo weakling, and that's Walter D'Souza, the printmaker. So we had done this for Subramanyan's farewell party. I think this is 79, when he was leaving Baroda. So it was done in a classroom, actually, and I was very inspired by this group called 𝗫𝗫, which was touring India. It had toured India's, you know, modern dance group. And so this whole thing was in mime, and it was like we entered from left and right and did these crazy sort of movements. And at the back, there was this friend, 𝗍𝗍𝗪, who was making these sounds, abstract sounds. So I can't remember exactly what happened, but Jyoti Bhai wanted to photograph it, so he said he asked us to redo it, but this is not what it was actually. We did something else. So this is on the library terrace. So we were wearing this, you know, mime thing. So apparently it was all politically very incorrect because there's this tribal cannibal, and then there's a monster, and all kinds of things, evil things happen in that park, which was probably Kamati Bagh, I don't know. Anyway, there's a long conversation, and and nobody had it right, and finally we got pieced the whole thing together. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody says it's not Subramaniam's farewell, but a freshers event. So it may all be wrong. so this is another thing which Nancy wanted to show. So I want to talk a bit about this. This was actually done during the Fine Arts Fair, and Kaneria sir and I worked on it. So we all worked on it actually, and he made these very heavy sort of, what are they called, these things, rods, these things, no, the infrastructure, what is it called? Sorry, no, it was made in rods. Anyway, they were very heavy and we covered them with cloth and made this. But this has a history. Armature, exactly, armature. Sorry, I'm forgetting my sculpture history. So these are armatures, and so we sort of, I think we tied it around our waists or something like that, and they were quite huge, about 10 feet high. And so this, but the thing is, this was done during the Fine Arts Fair, where we all dressed up as various animals. I'm that so-called peacock, and my another friend is the cobra. And we'd wander around the fair, and we just enact little things when we encountered each other. But this was, dates back to, you know, in 79 or 80, there was this 𝗊𝘌𝘕𝘛𝘌𝘕 flood, which was a man-made thing, and so it was a disaster, man-made disaster. So Mani sir said, he was there then, and he said, let's do something, a program and collect money for the 𝗊𝘌𝘕𝘛𝘌𝘕 flood. So myself and a friend of mine also from Bangalore said, we'll do a story from the Panchatantra, and we got people together and we started planning it and rehearsing. And then I had this very unfortunate accident when I broke my, I had a fracture and I was, grounded in bed. But other friends sort of directed it. So this was sort of like recalling that, but new costumes were made. I don't think for the actual Panchatantra, which was held in the university auditorium, these costumes were made. They must have been lighter because they were sort of prancing around and all that on stage. So, oh, how come? This is the wrong, I gave another one. No, there was another thing but I updated it. It's not there, the update. This is what I'd sent. Then I came here and updated it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I just, I mean, that's it, but I just wanted to show you a whole lot of images of my performance works, characters. That's all very quickly. But Chaiti, this is the original thing I sent from Bangalore, but I added to this and with the, what's her name, Shriza. And I asked her, like, where is it? Yeah, I don't think she's given it to you.
So, do you have the images with you?
No, I don't, because I didn't get my thing. She told me to you. I did that yesterday, actually. Yeah. Let's wind up. Yeah, okay, sorry, okay, I'll just talk about them, pardon? I can't draw it, take it out now, because that's what I did. They're on my website, but I'll have to look for each one. It's okay, let's just, yeah, sorry, but you can just look up I'm sure some of you know my work, and you can look them up on my website, or it's on the web. But I was very interested in this whole idea of 𝗊𝘓𝘕𝘎, because I didn't really connect it with Subramanyan's work at all. So, you don't know at how these influences creep in, or whether the influences at all, or the sort of parallel sort of or contiguous kind of practices, which come out of some, there's a kind of bed of something, and for example, I never thought I was interested particularly by Ghulam Sheikh's works, and he was my art history professor, but I find that the way I quote from various references and from art history and different kinds of sources, it's so very much like the way he works, and I would never have, it's very recently that I realized it. So when Nancy asked me to show, later work of my performance, all these characters, so I was thinking it's actually like the 𝗊𝘓𝘕𝘎, because I'm sort of shape-shifting. I don't think Geeta Kapoor said my personality was fluid, or my persona was fluid. I don't think my persona is so fluid, but I assume they're performative, I'm acting. It's not that I become that person, I'm just playing those roles for various reasons. And the reason why I play those roles is, I work in photo performance, and I make videos in which I also perform. And very recently, I've started doing live performance as well. So, in fact, recently in January, I had a performance, a cooking performance for this festival called Beyond the Edge, where I cooked a recipe that Gauri Lankesh had given me, dressed as 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 Tagore's Bharat Mata. So I take a lot of these characters from female characters mainly. I've started doing some male characters as well, from history, from historical images. Pardon? Oh, sorry. No, that's okay. We'll just put it off. No, I've finished showing the slides. Yeah. Sorry, I'll just put it off. Yeah. So people have asked me, why do you have to perform? And why can't you just ask other people to perform? I mean, other people also perform in my works. There are other characters. But what happens when I put myself as the artist in the work is, of course, that old thing of subject and object. One of them is that the whole feminist thing is that male artists have been objectifying women, and now, you take over, you take the agency, and you create your own sort of images. So, and then again, I put myself as the artist into the narrative, so which could be from any age. But they're all very popular images and influential images, and part of this whole inheritance of culture and cultural memory, as I call it. So what I'm doing is I'm shifting around this thing, that image, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's in fact, I've done Kali. So I've done this famous kind of calendar image of Kali dancing on Shiva, which was supposed to be one of the, images of Mother India at one point. Kali was also a Mother India. And so I take from, different images, different periods of art history, and then also from the present, and a lot of references from popular art, film, literature, and so on. And also, like, I think the most contemporary work I've done, which is difficult to do, is 𝗍𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 It took 5 years to plan how to do it. So this kind of, so there's this shape-shifting kind of thing, but actually, as the artist, I'm not shifting. I'm very clear about, what I'm thinking about, and I assume these roles for a particular purpose, which is to draw attention, to recreate, and many times I recreate images, existing images, which are popular and well-known, to actually disturb them. And first of all, it brings it into the contemporary, and then it sort of destabilizes them and deconstructs them. And one of the ways of deconstructing is to construct them. So I make an elaborate tableau with a painted backdrop, costumes, props, and so on, and create that whole image. Maybe it's 𝗍𝘂𝘓𝘕𝘈𝘕𝘈 Lady in Moonlight. And then I photograph that. I sit over there. Somebody said like a living sculpture, and then I am photographed, and that becomes like a recreation. It's actually a copy of 𝗍𝘂𝘓𝘓𝘕𝘈𝘓's painting, or whatever, the original thing. But, there's this, but again, it's not quite that. It's different. So, what else can I say? So again, like somebody remarked that by putting myself into the work, I become the center of, I make myself the center of social and political inquiry. Should I stop?
No, you speak. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to search for something.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Use up time. That could be it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll very quickly show you the avatars. Pardon? Yeah. Sorry. confusion. Yeah, so I'm just quickly showing you some of the characters I've played. They may not be, it's distorted for some reason. Sorry, I just took it off the web, so you can always check them if you want. This is my first character, Phantom Lady, which is based on a character played by fearless Nadia, who goes to Bombay in search of her lost twin sister. Why is it getting strange? Sorry, it's not like that on the computer. So this is the vamp. So I like these. Sometimes I have these two characters. So these are fictions which I call photo romances, which are like stories, but they don't have text, and they're actually shot on live locations. So I've done several of these photo romances, and they're all these popular women's stories and stereotypes. I work a lot with archetypes and stereotypes. Sorry, they're all sort of distorted a bit. This is called Sunere Sapne. They're painted photographs. I'm also very interested in the history of photography and using all these old kind of... So there again, there's this dreaming housewife in a nightie. And then there's this other character who's this nightclub dancer in a golden frock. So this is a thing called, photo romance called Darde Dil, about a kind of a tragic romance set in a Haveli in old Delhi. I'm just showing you one picture from each just to... this is from a set of photographs I got taken in a very interesting old studio in Mumbai called India Photo Studio, where this gentleman, this photographer has shot some of the most famous photographs of the Indian film stars in the 50s and 60s, Mr. J.H. Thakur. So I took from his style, which is the film noir style. I use it a lot in my work, actually. So it's called Navrasa. So it's about the Navrasa. This is, I think, 𝗵𝘂𝘆. Sorry, they're all squashed. I don't know why. It's Shantarasa, based on Michelangelo's. This is Hasya. This is something else. This is called on these three women. This is not the Navrasa suite. So this is from the native women of South India, manners and customs. I actually had the show in Seagull some years ago, many years ago, 20 years ago. So these are characters. This is a recreation of 16th century Deccani miniature painting. It's called Yogini. This is Ravi Verma's Lady in Moonlight. So they're very elaborate constructions. Very theatrical, actually. A lot of theater people say, how come you're doing something so close to theater? But, you know, I realized that Ravi Verma was actually very influenced by theater, and he also influenced theater and film. Because recently, some years ago, these photographs, his reference photographs have been discovered, which have been written about. Apparently, he used to make, for example, his models pose against a painted backdrop and take photographs and paint from those photographs. So he might have done that. So this is another Hunterwali kind of thing. It's actually Jayalalitha in the original. In some, this is from, that's it, I've finished. So I'll just quickly show them. This is a male role, Vasco da Gama, which I played. Yeah, I think this is it. Okay, thank you.
It's inside this.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Nancy and Ushmita, to give me this opportunity to be part of this closing ceremony, to come and share some of my own experiences and thoughts around 𝘊𝘓𝘓. I'm more comfortable referring 𝘊𝘓𝘓 as 𝘊𝘓𝘓 than KGS or K G Subramanyan. But yeah, I mean, it's a very important time that we are looking at 𝘊𝘓𝘓's works and also looking at this exhibition which you have curated. Because I often look at 𝘊𝘓𝘓 as somebody who has worked within that interface of being a pedagogue and a practitioner, in the sense, or merged them together. His whole practice has been about pedagogy. And somewhere, and also I was always very much intrigued about this separation between practitioner and quote-unquote art educator. Often in the art world, we make that kind of a distinction or kind of a difference of roles. And as a student of Shantiniketan Kala Bhavan, I was not really directly having 𝘊𝘓𝘓 as one of our faculties. When he was already retired, I joined in 1990, and he was already Professor Emeritus at the time. But yeah, I mean, we had often opportunities, in the sense, made the courage to go and visit him or sort of get an appointment to talk to him and show our works to them. And but what I have always really, I mean, today when I look back of my interactions or my opportunities to meet him, is that he's always in that conversational mode of creating a kind of a discursive relationship with whoever is the student, or in whatever form he's approaching. And most of the time he would be not necessarily talking about what is happening in the work, but talk about certain other things, other parallel references. So at one point, we were all discussing about what is this difference between a subjective and objectivity. This was going on in the campus, and a lot of students were discussing, and he was very smilingly, he said that, don't need to bother about the difference. They coexist, and you look at it from that perspective, in the sense. And I remember he would always talk about this idea of resonance of space. Because today when I look at my own practice, I am really not necessarily doing a representational mode of practice, which is, I think 𝘊𝘓𝘓 has dedicated his life into that mode of how to engage representation as a method of disrupting a certain idiom or a certain prototype of certain kind of an iconography or an image as a situation or a space. And but what inspires me mostly, it's his whole attempt of revealing the structure, constantly opening up the discourse. And when you look at his paintings also, it's not just image, it's about how it is enacting in the space, how it is unfolding itself constantly. So as a practitioner, I often feel that even his paintings are sort of placing itself between a certain idea and a certain process, and you are unfolding with the work. So as a practitioner, joining Kala Bhavan and working, also studying there are certain very important things which I think 𝘊𝘓𝘓 as a practitioner carried that legacy within his practice. First of all, it's this multiplicity of approach and looking at materiality from a very process-based encounter. And he often would say that there is a lot of research to be done about what is we mean by tradition, and that there is hardly any documentation of practices that exists before us. I mean, and whenever we talk about dissertation or things, he would always say that, first we need to document. There's so much of practice which are not even included in the larger domain of practice. And I think today when I look at 𝘊𝘓𝘓's legacy, or as a kind of inspiration that constantly drives me, is this criticality that he brings into a historical or historicizing practice within the domain of whatever mode or form you are doing something, and bringing in this multiple approach of engaging. So although my practice at this point is not necessarily re-engaging or extending the idea of an image as per, say, as a controlled image, which is generated by the individual into a certain kind of body of materiality. But his resonance continues in the process, that to look at a situation, a social situation, or a spatial situation, or a communitarian situation as this interface of meeting of different discourses and the performative aspect of it. I mean, I think that's what became more important for me as a practitioner, engaging within the institute. And I often see him as one of those very few practitioners who disrupted being part of the institution. I mean, working within the institute and engaging with the institutional norms and creating a space which is constantly pushing the borders of what is reality or what is realism in that sense, and you know, creating this possibility of an informal space visible within the very formal system of how you represent or how you run an institute or how you decide. So it's more of this kind of vibes where I situate myself when I look at 𝘊𝘓𝘕𝘓 as an inspiration, and of course as a person he has been always a person that you can go and engage with and bring in these situations. So to this presentation I would make it a little short. I will just try to show you some of my own interests in pedagogy as a kind of a form of practice, and what it does to look at pedagogy as a public intervention methodology, of how to engage within a public situation, because the idea of public practice or art in public spaces is also about questioning the whole formality or formalism that is brought to us from a colonial perspective, and how we structure public space as this power structure, and how you disrupt or how do you re-engage and create a situation of dialogue or public sphere in the context. So I will go more to some of the projects and hope it will make some sense, because to present as part of an exhibition of K G Subramanyan, it's always, I don't know whether my presentation will add certain extension to what we are discussing here. The something is here in the screen. Shall I say no or yes? Choiti? Okay, I will just go straight to the presentation. Are we going to the stream? Okay. So I sort of, this is part of a larger presentation which I shared with Nancy, and she said that, okay, you can continue with it, but I think we will skip this part, which is more about defining the notion of pedagogy, how it has emerged in Shantiniketan, how Shantiniketan looked at pedagogy as a kind of a interventionist mode, how as a holistic mode, whether it is the campus life, or it is the way the architectures are being designed, or the way the lifestyle-based knowledge practice that was emerging within the campus, or the mural traditions that we have seen in Shantiniketan, which almost became the content of the pedagogical mood, that how you situate history, how you situate language, how you situate lifestyle within a certain process of making. And of course, these are all examples which are there, which became a kind of a legacy of pedagogy in process, which is constantly unfolding, and students are becoming part of that encounter. And how, so I have often thought that in contemporary times, when we look at public situations or public art practice, Shantiniketan becomes a very important history that needs to be re-engaged and revitalized. Of course, in the last Documenta in 2017, there was an attempt to re-engage with it. but it's really due that, and also within the Shantiniketan pedagogy also, I think it has not been addressed properly. It is very fragmented. We have often looked at Shantiniketan as a cultural body, not necessarily quote unquote a totalitarian, kind of a holistic artistic body. Its artworks are looked, studio practice are looked in one eye, its cultural practices are looked in another eye, its rural reconstruction is conceived in another frame, and never we have really integrated these multiple layers in which Shantiniketan is proposing a certain kind of a pedagogical tool for a future generation of how to engage with landscape, sight, memory, everything. So that becomes a very important criteria for me to engage and reconsider this, revisit these methods and process. And what with Manida, it's always has been this notion of the workshop, you know, whether he is making by himself and students are coming and going, or he is engaging or doing some things within Nandan Mela, and we are seeing that. And those tools becomes very important for me in the sense that when we look at pedagogy as art practice, what we mean by pedagogy as art practice, I mean, that is something, but these are certain examples which, again, the 𝗡𝗟𝗓𝗓, the festivals of Shantiniketan, where students are introduced into this holistic mode of introduction to what is practice. I mean, it's not just about doing your own work, but getting into this kind of a collective dialogue, learning from each other's process, and which is again a sustenance, which is kind of a continuity that is coming from generations who are there and you are learning from each other. Again, I think Black House also becomes a very important pillar for me. Here I am parallelly posing Manida's practice and Black House as a kind of a collective method of making, which also inspires my argument towards pedagogy as art practice, because it's a fantastic example of collective making, dialogue with indigenous knowledge, quotations, using a lot of references which are past images and reconstructing them, and how we engage with history as a content in the present. I mean, Black House still becomes a very important example of this form. But these are certain points I will just very much skip. We can talk about it in the questionnaire if we have time. So I will just share 2-3 projects. One, so many of the time in the campus or within the everyday life of art practice that we do, I often try to develop or look at certain tools from inside out and how to open up its process in a more performative poetic framework. So this project which developed as a workshop on printmaking on silk screen. So I was looking at the whole possibility of what is to expose. And I think Pushpamala would be also facing this, that when you perform and then when you document, the two realities that you know, encounter, one being live and how document becomes a post-process argument, which is again an image that you are engaging with. So I was thinking that even the process of exposing itself is a time-bound process. It is there is a time lapse in between, and how that moment can become a certain kind of a poetry of looking at the absence of the image, because the body is no more there, and silk screen provides you that possibility. And so I sort of invited students to explore certain narratives around their process of from where they're coming, what are the backgrounds they're coming, and then to select images and then to sit together. And while their shadow is being cast on this screen, we were having conversations of their ideas of violence. This is the first year in 2008, but it started in 2004. And in this process, we are also investigating the possibility of silk screen as a performative language, as a process-based language, which can become a moment of absence when you wash it off, and not necessarily take a print, but the screen becomes a memory of the absence of the body. Because it's very interesting what silk screen does, is that that light which you use becomes the content. Because if you're exposing with projector, or if you're exposing with a slide projector, the light becomes two different kind of body, and it creates definition of the body differently. So this continued for 10 years. Every year it became a ritual. I think that's also another very interesting part of pedagogy, is that it's very ritualistic in a sense that it repeats. It brings you back to the same syllabus or the same structure over and over again, but how do you re-engage and redefine it over and over? So this process then became, after 10 years, we used different kinds of lights, sometimes with tube lights, sometimes with projectors, sometimes with digital projectors, and how the body responds differently in the light. And the screens became documents of absence of students' bodies who came and left the institute. So there was also a lot of video documentation or video recording of the conversations, which were also shared together. So this was how, so we did one exercise with the Da Vinci's drawing and then put the body inside it and see how our bodies are all imperfections and constructed in that sense. So this was exposed with soil from the local landscape, and then the material was used to create that spaces, and then students posed different gestures that were coming. So every year we would be having different kinds of content to engage with. This then again I extended it to another group of students, not from Shantiniketan but in Bangalore, CKP, and where we explored the city and its narrative and how individually students would carry the memory of the body and then be there and explored a process of mural. So then the shadows, it's not shadow, it's not silhouette, it's also the body, because your body is not static, it's constantly in action. So that is also reflected in the exposure in that process. And there were documentations that we made on the city. So many of the time my practice goes into this kind of shared spaces, and it's not that you are deciding everything, but there are a lot of things which are being improvised or contributed by the students or participatory communities with whom I work. So this is how the shadow casting became. This is again in another place where in a school, in Mayo School, where we talked about the freedom. It's a girls' school, and we explored again through workshops. And now in this context, I would also like to say that this whole idea of body and gestures was very much my experience with Badal Sarkar, who was in Shantiniketan in 94, 95. And so gesture, body, movements, sculptural movement, and a lot of other layers we worked together. Shrota is here. He would be a good associate of that time that we experienced. So it came back in the process also that how the real body and the process of making materiality can work together into a certain form. I will show this small, again, so visiting different sites or different places, often I sort of look at how to explore a certain method of working together. And through that method of working, a certain moment emerges in the process, and how it gets then extended into the public or the people who are coming in. So a public engagement doesn't remain only an object to be seen, but is shared as a layers of different process of making together. So this was in Bodoland, and it was in 2004, where after the peace treaty between the Indian government and the Bodo Territorial Council, they sort of invited and made a workshop for 15 days. So I thought that it was a Lalit Kala collaboration. And the first thing that I was interested is that how the villages are functioning, you know, after this almost kind of a war-like situation, what is the future they are imagining. And in the village I could find this lot of broken looms, and weaving as a tradition is very much core to a Bodo personal lifestyle. Every woman has to weave. But then because of the war, it has stopped. So we sort of, I engaged with the people to see whether those broken looms could be constructed into a house. And this military tent was inside the campus where this workshop was happening. So we created a house of the Bodo design in the space, and the women from the village, they came over to weave a piece of cloth in the process. So then the weaving process became a way for learning both for myself, that how the community behaves or recollects their memories. It also became a way in which the younger generation of the community who are no more weaving, because the process is totally fragmented now, how they would engage with that tool. And so a lot of conversations emerged during the whole process, which was then video documented in the process of the whole dialogue. and it was shared as the last encounter with the house, where the projection disrupted the house structure. Now, teaching in Shantiniketan is also kind of, get expanded into your personal life, in your everyday life, and you live around with the Santali communities who are coexisting with the university model, which has been the legacy of the university. And but in the course of the last 60 or 70 years, the role of the university has also changed, and how the Santali presence in the university is also becoming very strange, in the sense that there are a lot of contention of what is the border, what is the demarcation of the university. So the free passage that 𝗍𝗂𝗵𝘕𝘎 would work with and have his sculpture being made and encounter with the community while making is no more a reality today. So efforts has to be made from both sides to how to re-engage with those tools. So this is one way I thought that why not try to, so this is the 𝗊𝘰𝗵𝘆, which is now at this point, and there are walls which has come up that campus. So that village is now cordoned into a singular system. So within the village, there are, of course, the regular rituals of collecting leaves and things are going on. So how to then work with these materials together and find some other possibility of working together. So I proposed a process of making paper from these leaves, and it became a kind of a 4 months process where we tried to make paper from the whole process. Ong is here. I'm really indebted to him for teaching us the method of how to make paper from natural fiber, and it got extended into the community situation. So in this process also, a lot of dialogue started emerging in terms of the landscape and how it is evolving, and how the community also is thinking about the projection of their own identity, because many of them are now studying in the university. They are becoming educated in the quote-unquote modern education system. So this conversation then transformed into a kind of a procession, which then was shared in the Hul festival, which is the celebration of the Santal revolution. And these small houses were made together, and these drawings were watermarks made by the young participants who were part of the village in 𝗊𝘰𝗵𝘆 and Fuldanga. And then it became a space of exploring with the larger community, what this material can do, and what are the role of this material, and how we can think of certain future sustenance or making of certain other ways of looking at certain process of creating an object or creating a so-called artwork. And we created these projection screens, which were made out of these watermark papers. And so from one side, you can see the process of how it happened, and on the other side, there were these drawings which are coming up. So it was done in the Hul festival. I think I will skip this because it's a long project. I will just end up with another last project, which is working with the landscape of Shantiniketan. It became also very important that how this different knowledge that exists within the landscape, not only in terms of indigenous practice, but also more sophisticated university education, where we all engage with landscape in our own ways and own terms. Like anthropologists will be working in a particular way, geographers will be working in a particular way. So I thought that it would be important to create an interface between these two systems, which are one which is very specialized and academic in nature, and the other which is hands-on everyday practice. So Mukhamukhi became a kind of a means of creating these gatherings. So it happened for 1.5 years. We were doing seasonal meetings in different villages in 𝘊𝘰𝗵𝘆. So 6 villages we could, according to the moja, we sort of met and created a conversation which then turned off into this one-day workshop process, which will be starting from breakfast to evening, making food together, and also looking at a different process of engaging with the land, and the process of, and what are the different memories or tools which are still being used, whether it is poetry or farming or geography teacher would come and share, because I created these shamiyanas, which are all basically census reports, which are available, and they became the kind of drawing for the gathering. And post-lunch, we will have these sessions where our geography professor would come and point at those shamiyanas and say that, okay, these are not design, these are all measurements of how much land is used for farming and how much we are using for other works and what is the unused landscape. So that's how it became a kind of a almost 1.5 years process of learning from each other's method. So yeah, I mean, 𝘊𝘓𝘓 comes back in different layers to my practice. I think his whole intervention as this, bringing the informal space as a sophisticated dialogue within the discourse of visual culture, I think still keeps on inspiring us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to be a real test of patience on this audience. So I have my phone so as to not overshoot, hopefully. Let me try. So I would like to start by thanking Nancy for inviting me on this panel and congratulate Nancy on curating the Centenary exhibition of 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓's work, but also 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓's time and space in which he lived and worked. Nancy's exhibition, and I said this to her earlier, Nancy's exhibition was a real lesson to me in how one curates a research-based project, locating an artist in a time and space, and viewing an artist of K G Subramanyan's stature with both empathy and criticality all at once. It was a complete lesson to me, and Nancy, thank you for that. I'd like to thank KCC for having me here today, for bringing these wonderful exhibitions to us. As I said to Nancy, I'm no authority on 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓. I did know him as Professor Emeritus when I studied at Kola Bhavan, and I was in the printmaking department, and we would emerge from there most of the time to eat mishti in the chatal, and 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓 would invariably pass a little witty comment every time we came out to do that. And but he was this towering figure. He was an intermittent visitor to the printmaking studio. And one of the things that I actually appreciated and learned later about 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓's printmaking practice was the fact that he understood the democratic spirit of printmaking, and he applied this to a lot of his work, particularly to not just in making prints, but also very much emulating the spirit of the graphic arts in his bookmaking practice, particularly the books that he made for children. And to many of us printmakers, 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓 really does stand as a very, very important figure in the history of Indian printmaking. I also personally emulate 𝘊𝘓𝘓𝘓 as an artist pedagogue, a role in which I myself function for many years now. as a practitioner and a pedagogue, just like Sanchayan has spoken at length about that. So Nancy asked me today to talk about my own curatorial practice and share some of my printmaking projects. To begin with, I think I first need to say what my research interest is and why. So I am a researcher in the history of Indian printmaking, to put it very, very simply. And why I embarked upon this is when, as a postgraduate student, I started to learn printmaking, and I always had, I was always interested in the history of art, but I realized that printmaking history is just not a part of the Indian art historical discourse. It had never been written, it did not feature in what was taught, and we just knew nothing about it. So I embarked upon a PhD after my master's in an attempt to trace the chronological history of Indian and development of Indian printmaking. Many years after that, I published a big tome called The Printed Picture with the Delhi Art Gallery. And the printed picture essentially maps the history, the chronological history and development of Indian printmaking. It's a straightforward history. Why did I do that? Because that history had never actually been written. And I felt that there was a great, great need to do that. And that's what led me to do this work. The printed picture materialized in an exhibition also called The Printed Picture, 4 Centuries of Indian Printmaking, with the Delhi Art Gallery, which was a deeply sort of research-based project that tried to map the chronological progression of Indian printmaking. And Delhi Art Gallery has, of course, this vast repository of work. At the time, they placed about 6,000 prints at my disposal, and I think they have much, much more now. And so, starting from the inception of printmaking in the colonial period, I took this all the way to the threshold of Indian modernism. I'm sorry, not to the threshold of Indian modernism, but beyond, to about the 1990s. So this was, and this actually became one of Delhi Art Gallery's most popular exhibitions. It was an exhibition that was extremely easy to move in the spirit of printmaking, which I believe, the mobility of this medium, I feel, is one of its greatest strengths. It can move, it can travel, it can reach audiences like almost no other art medium can. So keeping that spirit alive, the printed picture traveled widely across the length and breadth of this country. It actually remains a live exhibition that can still travel at any point in time. The publication was sort of widely received. Now from that, I will share a project with you today, which came sort of out of the printed picture. And this project is called Trajectories, 19th to 21st Century Printmaking from India and Pakistan. Now this was a unique opportunity that presented itself to me, and my co-curator, Kamila Hadi Chaudhry, who's from Pakistan, sort of hunted me out as the author and curator of the printed picture. And she proposed this exhibition as something that the Sharjah Art Museum wanted to do. Now this actually was a godsend because as we all know, we share a common history with India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh up to 1947. And so a lot of the beginnings, the art historical beginnings are actually common, but yet, at least with Pakistan, it all remains a very dark and gray area that we know very little about, especially in the pre-partition years. So this was actually a complete godsend, and I jumped at the opportunity, and today I'll take the opportunity to share this project with you. I'm just going to very quickly run through the initial slides. This is the inside of the museum, the Sharjah Art Museum. I was surprised to find that even at that time, Sharjah had 16 state-of-the-art museums. So we collected work from a wide number of sources, galleries, individuals, artists, etc. So these are just some installation views, which I'm going to very quickly run through. That is my co-curator and the curator of the Sharjah Art Museum. Okay. So these are still installation views. I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just running through these very quickly. All right, so the gallery has two wings, the East Wing and the West Wing. So the East Wing was, oops, did I just, okay. Yeah, so these are still, all right. Yeah, so one wing, the West Wing was devoted to the pre-partition and the years immediately after that, and the other wing, the East Wing, was devoted to contemporary practices. We did not separate it as India and Pakistan, but we tried to look at the practices holistically and the manner in which they either progressed together at one point in time, or they fed off each other, or there were points of commonality. So we began with, we did not look at European artists in India. We looked only at artists from the subcontinent itself. So the first section is popular picture production in the subcontinent. And we didn't have too many examples of this, but this is a Punjab lithograph from the early to mid 19th century. We went into popular picture production with lithographs and chromolithographs. This particular example is a rare example of a chromolithograph printed in Lahore. And then we went into how printmaking developed in the art schools. So this is a lot of class work from various artists, student work that came out of the art schools. This is a very interesting example of lithographic posters from the Mayo College of Art in Lahore. These are attributed to 𝗍𝗑𝗵𝗎𝗍𝗍𝗍. So very rare examples that we were lucky to get. And then we come to the birth of artistic printmaking with 𝗏𝗏𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗔𝗍𝗏 Tagore's 𝗊𝘂𝗀𝗧𝗏𝘓 or Realm of the Absurd. And some of the Bengal school artists who, of course, were the first pioneers of printmaking practice in India. We have Mukul De here. 𝘊𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗍 was an avid printmaker, and there are many, many etchings that are attributed to him. So these are all parallel practices that we see on what is now both sides of the border, but we are barely even aware of them. These are, of course, Nandalal, and followed by his students, Ramendranath, Binod Bihari, 𝗏𝗏𝗔𝗀𝗏 and with 𝗏𝗏𝗔𝗀𝗏, we see sort of other concerns in printmaking emerging, which have threads that continue. And now we look at partition and points of diversification and how, so printmakers actually responded very, very strongly to partition and its aftermath. So these are the works of Horendas, who, even though he's often very critically viewed, but in all fairness, I always like to say that he remained, even though he worked from a space of nostalgia, but he always remained very sort of true to his subject, and his yearning for the land that he had lost and left behind was always very prominent in his work. We, of course, look at the very important quartet of Zainul Abidin, Kamrul Hassan, who consequently went away to Bangladesh, or what used to be East Bengal after partition, and or East Pakistan. And Zainul Abidin is hailed as Shilpacharya in Bangladesh, as sort of the pioneer who led the art movement there. And the important two Indian artists in this quartet, the four artists of the Bengal famine we are now looking at. This is Chitta Prasad, of course, and Somnath Hoare. So Somnath Hoare we count among our pioneer printmakers. And so these are some of his works. And Zarina Hashmi, another very important diasporic Indian printmaker, Jagmohan Chopra, Krishna Reddy, and their parallels in Pakistan, Zahurul Akhlaq, who counts among the pioneer printmakers in Pakistan. We then looked at modernism, and these are the Pakistani artists. And we see various concerns emerging now in the modernist artists' works. These are the Indian artists, and we see preoccupations with abstraction, with figurative work, different idioms emerging in printmaking. We see artists like Jyoti Bhatt drawing from the popular and the folk, which are sort of new examples. We saw the work of the Pakistani printmaker Anwar Jalal Shamsa, who's very calligraphic in the sort of work he does. So there are all these different sources emerging. Anupam Sood, of course. And finally, we went into contemporary practice with, we have work from the 80s and 90s, and Anwar Saeed from a later generation. And finally, a lot of women printmakers from Pakistan who are very, very strong feminist artists. We have Meher Afros's work here. Naiza Khan, who does both, who is a printmaker by training, but also makes a lot of feminist sculptural work. And I've always maintained that printmaking and sculpture have strong affinities to each other, and printmakers often move fluidly from from the one to the other, with Krishna Reddy being one of the prime examples, who was trained as a sculptor and approached the the etching plate as a sort of metascape, where he actually created a sculptural surface from which he afterwards printed. Atif Khan, who's very steeped in the miniature tradition, and Nuraya Sheikh, another very feminist artist, Usman Ghauri, and Laila Rahman, and now we come to the Indian artists, Pinaki Borua, Suranjan Basu, very political artists, both of them. Both, unfortunately, we lost young. Walter D'Souza, who you already saw with Pushpamala in her performances at Baroda, very fine printmaker. Subha Ghosh, who is one of my personal favorites. Saad Ahmed and Imran Mudassar. So these are the more political artists whose work we're looking at. Cityscapes, also featuring on both sides of the border. This is Archana Hande's work, who's here in the audience with us today, with an animation that was developed from woodcut prints called All is Fair in Magic White, as well as another etching. Palani Appan in the narrative abstract kind of tradition. That's my work. Shakuntala Kulkarni, who trained as a printmaker but makes sculptural work as well. And T. Venkana, Tanuja Rane, Bala Subramaniam, Ravi Kumar Kashi, yeah, Devnath Basu, and yeah, so that's the project. I don't know if we have. Is that website in here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so just give me a moment. So this is another project which I'll just mention it as sort of, curating a website. This was born during COVID, and just a second. Yeah. Yeah. So this was, a project that was born during COVID, and it's okay, don't worry. Oh, it's not showing, okay, sorry. Okay, so, so during COVID, as we all know, artists face an existential crisis, and printmakers in particular, bereft of their studios, were even more distraught than many other artists were. And also, the pandemic kept extending, lockdowns kept extending, and it was just becoming all very frustrating. And I know, I could see my students becoming increasingly restive, and so on and so forth. I also felt the need to reach out. So if we talk about, research and pedagogy, so I teach the history of Indian printmaking. And one day when I was teaching this class online, as we were all doing during the pandemic, I was teaching the quartet that we just ran through of Zainul Abidin, Kamrul Hassan, Chitta Prasad, and Somnath Hor, and the prints that emerged from the Bengal famine. And I realized that this was perhaps the cue, and this was perhaps what I needed to do. So it was that sort of pedagogic practice that prompted Living a Dark Night. And I sort of decided once again to invoke the power of the print as a medium to engage with and reach out to a wider public, to make the artist's voice heard. And so, together with the Kala Chaupal Trust, we floated this project across the globe We received more than 120 entries of black and white lino card prints. It was a virtual exhibition first. We built a website, and because the lockdown kept getting extended, it was very difficult to send work, etc., etc. So to keep the interest alive, we generated an Instagram campaign where twice every week, Nilanjan is here. He was my assistant curator on this project. And so, in fact, he's the one who did this. Twice every week, we featured a black and white print from any part of the globe, and we wrote little blurbs about the artist and the work and so on, and that's how we kept it going. And this eventually, when we finally launched this as a website with an online exhibition, we had 7 histories of black and white relief printmaking across the globe. So there is this large body of knowledge that was generated from this work, in addition to the online exhibition, which continues to remain on the website, or rather now it's a viewing room, it's not an online exhibition. And when the pandemic finally opened up, we ran this project to 7 locations across the country. It was a very, very dynamic project that packed into a small crate that could travel for less than 2,000 rupees to any part of the country. And all we did was put the prints up with blue tack on the walls wherever we went. And we mostly managed to keep this exhibition out of gallery spaces. We were able to take this to institutional spaces and access wider audiences thereby. So the whole spirit of the project is very democratic. And KCC was one of the places that hosted the exhibition. So I'll leave it at that, and you can visit the Living a Dark Night website anytime and see the project. Thank you.
If you have been extremely patient, thank you. You're a wonderful audience. I think we should just clap for the audience now.